but I feel as if you could almost see the light, the late afternoon light, just filtering through her dress and catching her. You can almost see that that's possibly her little body there, and the light's just filtering through here. As I was saying, that works so well because of that.
It's not every day that you get a master artist to share a couple of things that completely changed her work forever. Meet Susan Harrison-Tustain. Susan is here with us from New Zealand. Susan, what are you going to teach us today?
I'm really excited to teach you two methods, two techniques that really revolutionized my own painting, or my paintings and my painting career. One's for oil and one's for all medium. So you're going to be in for quite a few surprises today.
Oh, right. Excellent. Okay, well, we're excited. Let's get this show rolling.
Well, as I was saying, I'm really excited to share these methods and these techniques. One of them, as I was saying, is can be for any medium at all, and there's one specifically for watercolor. This one here is a watercolor, but I've got so many things to show you that lead into what I do, and giving you that little bit of background will make all the difference to understanding what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and also why I do it. So let's look at some of my finished paintings to start with, because these will help you to see the effect of some of the methods that I'm using. Now, one of these methods is a yellow tonal value underwash, and it's like a tonal map, and you can see it here, how I've got different degrees of yellow, and that's also underneath my main study here. And what that does is it allows the shadows and the colors within the paintings to really glow. So this one here, and I might need to lift these up so you can see them.
Yeah, maybe you can hold it closer to the camera. That'd be great. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, any direction, because I really want to make this the best that I can for the viewers.
You're doing great.
There we go. Here, you can see how this yellow really glows through. And yet there's also some little nuances of yellow over here. This is what this method can do for pale and also delicate nuances of color. Now that one is a watercolor. This one here is also a watercolor. Now that's quite a surprise, isn't it?
It is.
With this, I've used yellow, a lot of yellow underneath, and you can see how those shadows really glow with luminosity. It also, you can see how it glows in the mid-tones and as well as in the light tones. So we get this beautiful transparency. And that's a wonderful thing, of course, about watercolor. You have these amazing transparent colors. Now, there's another one that I'd like to show you before we finish. And this one is an oil painting. Now, I'll show you the whole painting here. That's just an image of the painting. But I will actually show you a reproduction of the painting so you can see it more close up. So I hope you're able to see these beautiful depths of color in here. Yeah. The richness within these areas. These are the areas where we use a lot of the yellow and the tonal values and this map that I'm talking about. And gradually, as the colors and the petals start to present themselves into the light, we use less and less yellow. So the main depth of yellow and the tonal value underwash is right in here. Okay, so I'll show you.
And it's always yellow that you use, is that right?
Yes, yeah, and I'll explain why shortly. Here is an image of a tonal value underwash. Now, the reason I do this is because I want to create a much richer painting, a painting that has a beautiful depth, but it also, quite miraculously, creates a greater sense of presence as well. Not just the glow of color, but there are many, many wonderful benefits with using these tonal value yellow underwashes. This here is a watercolor, and you can see how I have several different tonal values here, but also on the rose. And you can see how the rose is starting to glow. I'll show you how.
And so that, let me just ask a question about that. You, on the very top of that rose, you've got almost a white, pinkish white petal. Does that have a little bit of yellow under it?
Yes, it does, but more in the shadow areas. In the lighter area, that's a really good question. In the lighter areas, I use very little yellow, if any at all. If the highlight is white, then leave it white. So the lighter the area is, the less yellow we use. And you don't have to be too particular about putting too much detail. Just be aware of where the highlights are and where the darkest darks are, and then everything else is in between. So it's white through to rich yellow.
So you're not doing, I just want to make sure I've got clarity on this for everybody. There's some questions in the comments. It's not just a matter of a tonal wash. It's trying to create the painting in a total wash so that you know where the various elements are going to fall, where the lights and darks of the painting are going to fall. You'll make those lighter in most cases. Is that right?
Where the darks are going to fall are the deepest, richest, most saturated areas. And where the lights are, they are the lightest areas. Right. And so what we end up with is a tonal value from, you know, like a black and white photograph. This is a black and white photograph of my painting. And you can see how we've got our darkest areas in the shadow areas. And then it comes lighter. And that's what we're doing, except in yellow.
Excellent.
Okay. So I've been showing you watercolor, but this is the same rose, except it's in oil.
It's beautiful.
You can see how these methods work in both oil and watercolor. This is just basic block in back here, but I've developed this so that you can see where we go, no matter what the medium. You could do this in acrylic as well as oil, watercolor, and so many other mediums. I originally was inspired to create a tonal value underwash because I studied the old masters and used to work in oils to start with. And I noticed that they used a lot of earth tones when they were creating these tonal value underlayers. And I thought, well, look, I want to experiment because I want to see if I can make my colors really sing. And so I did, and I tried lots of different colors, but I found the yellow was so clean and so fresh. And it really made, particularly my shadow colors, sing with vibrancy. And they had a wonderful naturalistic realism.
Wonderful.
Now, and also too, it's not just one layer. The first layer you put on will be your lightest, and then gradually as you move forward, you become deeper and darker in the darkest areas where the shadows are. Just like you see here, you can imagine there's maybe 2 washes of yellow on here. There would be 1 wash yellow here, none there. And in these dark areas here, I might have 3 washes of yellow. But as I was saying, there are other things. As this developed, I realized so many things. It gave me a greater sense of presence with the painting, a greater sense of substance. If you're painting skin, for instance, it feels as if you could reach in and touch that skin. If you're, it just gives that wonderful tangibility.
So it's more of a translucency for skin.
Yeah, and I'm using a wonderful paint. Now, this is the color.
Can you hold it up closer to the camera?
Sure.
It's kind of dark. It's hard to see. Okay.
How's that? So this is Aureolin Modern. It's a Sheminka color. You've got to be a little bit careful with colors because sometimes, you know, the names are used interchangeably. One brand might call it Aureolin and it could be a totally different color from another brand. This one here is ideal because it's semi-transparent. It has it's slightly staining, which gives a wonderful glow, and that's important. If you use something that is opaque, the color may sit on the surface of the paper with watercolor, and you really don't want that to happen. But with oils, this is it's another Schmincke brand, another Schmincke paint. This one's the Schmincke Norma, the professional, and it's lemon yellow. This one is not quite as transparent, but it certainly is semi-transparent, but a little bit less than the watercolor. And this one is lemon yellow. And that's ideal too, because that has that amazing glow that we need to just permeate through all our subsequent colors.
So when you're doing it for oil painting, do you try to use a transparent oil?
Yes, that is the ideal one. The semi-transparent one is the way to go. I'll show you. This is a oil painting on 24 karat gold leaf. And you can see the yellow that I put underneath here. Now, look at the finished work, and you can see how this literally glows with color. Look at the glow on her face. That's because I've been able to get that yellow underneath, and it gives a real naturalistic depth and transparency and richness to the painting.
Isn't it hard to paint on gold leaf?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yes, it is. But I love it. I absolutely love it.
So you're getting a little bit of a natural yellow tone, and you're getting that almost mirror reflection with the gold leaf because the light is reflecting through the transparency.
Yeah, every time with gold leaf, every time you look at it, look at the gold leaf here. And that was in a similar position, but at a different time of day. So the background, which is all gold leaf here, changes with the time of the day, and it just brings beautiful movement. It's such an incredible medium. Now, when as I said, I started in oil painting, and then I thought, well, I'd really love to try and paint in watercolor. And I thought I would really love to be able to create this tonal value map, this underlayer in watercolor. But the problem with watercolor is that the color generally sits, the pigment particles sit on the surface of the paper. And so that presents a problem. If the paint is sitting on top of the paper and we put another wash over top, that's going to lift those particles. And no matter what color we put on top, it's going to mix with them and it's going to sully those colors. So I had to work out a way of creating a tonal value map, just like I've got under here, but be able to do it in watercolor and for the particles not to move. So it took me quite some time, and I had developed my priming method. And this priming method is a 3-step priming method. What it does is I put clear water on my paper and I let it sink in till it's almost absorbed. And I've got an image I can show you. Oh, I hope our next door neighbour's not going to be mowing his lawns. I'm sorry if you could hear that, hopefully not. Now this is my first layer of my priming method. When it goes on the paper, it's shiny, just clear water. You can see how shiny that is. And I leave it for a little while until the sheen has gone. And you can see that there's a slight, it looks like a change in color, but all it is that the layers of the paper are absorbing that water, and they're just slightly raised. The surface is matte. So that's the time to go in with step 2. So step 1 is just a clear water wash over the paper. And I'll just show you that here now. I'll do it on here. I've got this one here just starting to sink in so that we can move on to this one here.
You're a very good teacher.
Oh, thank you. Do you know, I use logic because for me, if I can understand what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, but most of all, why I'm doing it and what happens, then I can retain it well. And I know that when we understand all those things, then we know that the people that with the artists that I'm teaching are going to understand it and retain it, because if we understand what happens, we can also build on it. So you can see I've just put a clear water wash on that, and that's starting to sink in. This one here, so you wait, and wherever you are, whatever time of day, however humid it is where you are, that's going to dry and absorb at different times. And quite often,
from here, it looks yellow. It's not. It's just pure water.
Oh no, I did actually have a little bit of yellow underneath that. I should have explained that.
Okay.
For no other reason other than that's just to show you that first.
Just so we can see
layer.
it.
Yeah, because I've already put some water on here and it is already starting to sink in. So remember, 3-step method. That's step 1. Step 2, we go in and imagine this has just been absorbed and the sheen has gone. And in this case, it hasn't actually quite gone, but imagine it has, and I'm just going to drop in some more clear water. And how much clear water you use depends on how much time you want to buy to give you time to get around the study. And what I mean by that is, if you imagine what's happening is our first layer of clear water has gone into the inner layers of the paper and is still being absorbed in this one here. Once that's absorbed, we've still got some moisture in those inner layers. When we come in with another clear water wash, and as I said, you determine how much water you use by how much you want your paint to flow, or how much you want it to stay closest to the brush. The more water we have, the quicker the paint will move and the less control you'll have. And that's a good little phrase that I use. More water, less control. Less water, more control. So I'll just put this over here so you can see it. And I'm picking up some of that Shemenka Aureolin. I think they might call it Aureolin hue at the moment. And they often change that hue to maybe Aureolin modern, but I think it's hue at the moment. So can you see how much pigment I've got on there? Not a lot. I don't use a lot because our aim is to get those finely ground pigments into that inner layer. So the inner layer is damp. I've just put another layer on, and I'm just going to, I might pick up a little bit more pigment so you can see it better. Tell me if it's difficult to see, please.
Oh, you can see it very well.
Good. Now, that is going to be drawn into the inner layers of the paper. And because we've already created that path with the first clear water wash, this second layer has got enough moisture on it that it's going to aid in pulling that yellow down into that inner layer. Because what we're trying to do, just like with oil paint, we're trying to isolate this layer so that subsequent layers are not going to lift those particles. Another quick thing that I'll tell you here, that while we're here, a great tip that I use all the time is when I'm dropping in paint, if I want to drop it in quite quickly and create the greatest depth, what I do is I dab. I don't stroke. So when I dab, we'll just do it on this one because it's relatively clear. When I stroke, we get a small amount, and then when you lift it off, that's when you get your largest concentration. Can you see that? I hope you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Yep. So therefore, I thought, right, rather than stroke and do that, I'm going to dab. And you see how I'm getting a much greater concentration, and I'm in much more control, and I can move much more quickly.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and that's part of the logic. So what I'm doing here is just moving my way around. So step 1 was clear water, let it sink in until that sheen, that matte looking sheen, the sheen is gone and we've got that matte surface. Step 2, another clear water wash, and then immediately we come in with step 3, which is the pigmented wash. You step back and you let it absorb. Now, what I want to show you, I've got a good example of what happens.
You're very prepared.
Yes, I am. I am. Well, I know what makes sense, and if I've got everything visually to show you, then you'll see and you'll understand. Okay, so see here, what I've got is, and I've used this before in a demonstration, in a workshop, I have just put thick paint on top in a wet and wet, a wet on dry, or a dry brush would also give the same effect. That paint is sitting on the surface. When I do this, you see how putting in a subsequent wash is going to lift those particles. If I try to lay another color on top of that, it lessens the glow, it sullies the paint, it mixes with the paint, and so the paint is not isolated, and it just dulls it right down. What we want is to create a beautiful glow, just like you saw in those original paintings that I showed you before. Now this one here, I have used my priming method, and you see how I've got the yellow underneath, and then I've put an orange wash over top and a little bit of red here. And you can see how I've got that beautiful blend. That's because my priming method allows us time. The first layer I put the yellow on, the next layer I put a little bit of orange on and a little bit of red, and you see how we've got these beautiful soft blends. And that's how my paintings are underneath my final layers. So I start with my priming method, and the second where I've come in and put in color other than yellow, I've also used my priming method here. Then I go on to using the traditional wet and wet method, wet on dry, and then the dry brush for the final details, for the fine tuning.
So wet on wet, then wet on dry, and then dry brush.
Yeah, so priming method first, then wet on wet, wet on dry, and dry brush. And that, you see how you get, see the wonderful glow that's in that apple. And I get that because I'm using that yellow underneath, and it really allows it to glow. I'll just show you another example. You can see that apple there. Now that looks like an apple.
Absolutely.
But I didn't put much yellow. Oh, I don't think I put any yellow underneath, but I mixed some yellow in with the green, so that we have a little bit of yellow, so I can show you the difference between mixing and using my priming method and isolating that layer. Now compare this apple. Can you see how much more tangible it is? Can
Absolutely.
you see? Let's compare the two together. This looks raw. The white of the paper is showing through. When we allow the white of the paper to show through, it's much, much better if we use that for the coldest areas. Our coldest color on our palette is the white. And of course, as watercolorists, we don't use white. We use the white of the paper. So we allow our coolest colors to show through, and we want that. But if in the other areas, we lay in the yellow tonal value map, and we vary it where we see we need more yellow or less yellow. And that way we create a wonderful roundness of form, a true feeling of substance, and also tangibility. With something like an apple study, you want your viewers to feel as if they could reach in and want to bite that apple, and they imagine how juicy it is. So, that's a good example where you see the two together.
Mm-hmm. Makes a big difference.
It certainly does. It certainly does.
I recently tried, someone told me a slightly different technique, but somebody told me to just do like an Indian yellow, kind of a light Indian yellow underpainting in oil, and then to dab, like in the sky, dab some blue of a similar value on top of it, but leave that oil showing through. And it created this wonderful vibration.
Oh, yes, it would. Yeah, it absolutely would. And that's actually really good that you said that, Eric, while I think of it, if when you're painting skies, be very, very careful how much, if you're going to put, so often the blues that we have on our palette are very blue and they may need to be mixed slightly. Oh, and this method that I'm doing, subsequent cut, this you can do this for any color, and also mixes. You can mix your color and you can isolate them just like we've been talking about. But when you're creating skies, sometimes we have to mix the blues slightly to make them look a little bit more natural. If you put yellow underneath, unless it's almost an imperceivable wash, it can turn it a little bit green. So you have more control if you mix your blues and then put them on your skies. I was just going to show you this. This is a page out of my ebook, and I wanted to show you how this. Hopefully you can see it. This hollyhock has very little yellow underneath, and I put the shadow on. And can you see how that looks quite dead? The shadow looks dull. Here, I have put more yellow, and it just glows so much more, and it gives a much greater naturalistic realism. So this looks much more natural and much more appealing than this one over here.
I think this is a great discovery. I think we should all try it.
Thank you. Thank you. So you can see how that works. But once again, you can use any color. You can use color mixes. But if we isolate that color in the inner layers of the paper, you cannot shift that color. It is there and it just glows through. So imagine if we had pieces of stained glass, several layers, and we had yellow underneath, and then we had maybe the equivalent, maybe alizarin crimson permanent, and maybe phthalo blue, and then maybe translucent orange. But that yellow is going to permeate through and create this amazing glow. If we just had the white of the paper, the final color we would end up with will be so much more raw than it would if we had the yellow underneath. And I'm just going to show you just a few more examples. These are some of my really early works, but they really show up what I mean. You see, this dress that she's wearing still reads cream, but can you see how in the inner layers here, in the folds, we've got this amazing glow? That's only possible because this was a watercolor. I isolated the yellow. If I hadn't isolated that yellow, that would look much more flat and it just wouldn't glow anywhere as well. But I feel as if you could almost see the light, the late afternoon light, just filtering through her dress and catching her. You can almost see that that's possibly her little body there, and the light's just filtering through here. As I was saying, that works so well because of that. You can also use it to create a statement in your painting. You see, all these colors here are relatively dull and they're quite cool. I put a yellow here, underneath here, and quite a strong yellow. I avoided the highlights. Of course, you almost always must avoid the highlights. But you see how that apple really glows.
Yeah,
and it glows.
And then it looks like you
more.
put it in where the sun is hitting in the back in the window a little bit too.
Yeah, exactly. Good observation. So you can see I'm using contrast. I'm using warm colors against cool colors, but I'm also using intensity and glow against more dull areas. So, you know, there are lots of ways of using this. And this was the last one that I was going to show you. I've used a lot of yellow in the Venetian fountain, but I've also used a lot of yellow underneath his skin, but I avoided the highlights. And his skin is almost tangible. But another great lesson with this one is down here, I've used lots of yellow because I wanted the cobblestones. When cobblestones are wet, they have so many colors, and it's just fabulous to paint these in watercolor. So I wanted to describe that, to capture those wonderful colors of the wet cobbles. But the areas behind are not wet because, of course, the fountain here is wetting it and splashing the water out. So I used quite strong area of tonal value underwash here, yellow tonal value underwash. I avoided the reflections, and then gradually as I went further back, I used next to nothing. And then by the time I got back here, I probably didn't use any at all. I would have used some in the suggestion of houses, but it just goes to show how you're in control, and you can create something that gives us this great sense of presence and this incredible roundness of form. So the tonal value, the light to dark of the yellow, adds so much to our sense of reality and our three-dimensional form that we're trying to create.
Fabulous.
So I don't know how much time we've got left, but I was just going to show you some things here. Right. So what we've got here is we've got 3 different tones, as I was saying before, of the yellow underwash, and of course white. And so you can see here that I've got a lot more yellow under here than I have here. So you just control how much you would like. Actually, there's one other thing I'll show you.
Okay.
Everybody wants to know about painting leaves. So I've got this little demonstration here to show you. Now, if Richard can guide me to make sure that you can see what I want to show you. Over here, I have a lot of yellow underneath here. And you can see how that petal has a great sense of reality. And if I put a shadow on there, it would look as if it was just coming out of the paper. This one here may be in more light, and I haven't got as much yellow. So I've used, and quite often with leaves, on one side is more rich, and the other side there are more highlights. And this is what I'm establishing here. So highlights need more light, and the other side often needs a little bit more yellow. This one doesn't have as much yellow as this. But the other thing that I wanted to show you was that within the segments, and you can decide how much detail you go into, but in the segments, we have light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. So transpose that into our tonal yellow underwashes. We have highlights and we have a mid-tone yellow, and we've got rich, well, I say mid-tone, a little bit mid-tone, but also we talk about saturation, greater saturation here, mid-saturation here, and highlight there. And this is what helps us to create that wonderful roundness of form, and those almost like a puff on each of the segments. So you see here,
beautiful leaves.
Thank you. And do you know, think about all the applications of this. Maybe we're creating a milk churn, a rounded milk churn, exactly the same. More yellow on the side that has the shadow, because we really want that yellow to glow through those shadow colors. So we use the most intense underneath shadows. So our greatest yellow here is in the shadowed areas, and then a little bit less in the mid-tone, and then we've got our highlights. Wonderful. And you can see a leaf here where I have more yellow on this side and less on that one, and I've allowed the highlights to show. So therefore, we've got a lot more yellow here because there are fewer highlights. But on this side, we don't want the yellow and the highlights. We want it over here. And that has helped me to be able to describe that form.
Wonderful. So you had something else you were going to teach too, right?
Yeah, so we talked about the yellow tonal wash, and we've talked about how with oil color, it's automatically isolated in the paper. With watercolor, I had to find a way of being able to isolate it. And I have, and that's my priming method. So with my priming method, all these colors are isolated. So that's the step 1 clear water wash, step 2 clear water wash, and then step 1, and then allow that clear water wash to be absorbed. Step 2 is another clear water wash once it had come to that matte surface. So step 2 is clear water, and then immediately come in with the yellow. And when that's dry, that is isolated within the layers. And that's where we can put on. I could throw this painting in a bath and none of that color would lift.
Really?
I could put 30, not that I would, I could put 30 clear washes on top of that, and I would still have those underneath colors permeating through and creating the beautiful glow. So that's the two things. It is the tonal yellow, what I'm talking about, underwash and oils, it's underglaze, but it's also a map. And I'll just quickly tell you, because I know we're running out of time, some of the benefits of this this map, this underlayer that we're doing, is that when you have a painting and it's all white, or you know, a drawing, and we've got lots of pencil lines, it can become a maze, particularly when we're doing something like a multi-petaled rose, or something that's really busy, and it's very hard to determine where you are. You're thinking, gosh, no, which petal am I on, or which post was I working on? You know, it's hard to find, to determine what this underlayer. I'll see if I can go back to that image, which I have over here somewhere. Doesn't have to be too detailed, but what this does, it allows us, in fact, I'll go to the earlier one, that one there. We think, okay, so we're going to be painting in here. Now, we've got our subject to the side, and we know that we want to paint a particular petal. And you look here, and if it's just white paper or white canvas and a drawing, it's very hard to know where we're working. This map allows us to immediately pinpoint where we're working. It takes a lot of guesswork out of thinking, oh, look, it's around here somewhere. It's got to be one of these. It just gives us those landmarks.
Now, do you typically, once you've done that, do you typically put your darks in first, or what do you work on first?
No, I go from light to dark. So if we look at this petal here, imagine we've completed the yellow layer, which would be white here, and I would have started at this side here. I would have had my priming wash over all the 3 steps of priming all over here, and I'd have dropped my yellow here, and I actually let the water do a lot of the painting for me, and it just allows that yellow to graduate out. The great thing about that priming method, it buys you lots of time. If you're painting wet on wet, you're going straight into dry paper underneath, and you only have a certain amount of time before you get to that no-go area. But with the priming method, you can do a relatively large sky and get across it quite quickly, because you've bought that extra time, because the inner layers of paper are wet, and that means it slows the absorption of your color layer. So you have a lot more time to manipulate, to add extra colors, to create lovely blends, to soften edges, to lift color, all those things. It really brings you a lot of control. Another thing that I find is the brushes make a huge difference.
I was just about to ask you what kind of brushes you're using and what kind of paper.
Yeah, well, I use Ash 300 GSM, or I think it's 140 pound GSM hot pressed. I find that gives me the beautiful surface that I want, and I'm so familiar with how it's got a lovely hard surface, which also slows down some of the absorption. And I love the surface. If you're doing any reproductions, that's great for that too. But I love the almost smooth look of it. But the brushes that I love are the Da Vinci brushes. Actually, it's good that you mentioned it, because you really don't need many brushes. I use this for my skies. I use this for my large areas, and quite often areas like this, because it's got such a beautiful point. This is a, what is that? This is series 44. It's a Kolinsky sable, but you buy one of these and they're not inexpensive, but they last. I've had this for years. literally years, and I use it all the time. Another Kolinsky sable, beautiful points. And what's great about the brushes, I've tried loads of brushes, but these are superb. What they do, they've got a lovely flex. They always come back to the point. I quite often do this and ensure that it's the amount of point I want. Sometimes you don't want it too much, too pointed. But the barrel is wonderful because I can control how much water and how much paint I'm dropping into my painting.
Nice.
It just delivers it evenly, but by
a little bit of pressure,
putting the right amount. Yeah, exactly. It's all about pressure. If I press hard, I'll get more. If I just touch, you just get the tiniest amount. So these are my workhorses. These are the 122. You can see as I put something on top of here, I've got some yellow that has come over the edge. Once it's dry, bit of clear water, actually just before it dries, because once it's dry, it's hard to get off. Bit of clear water and just go around the edge. And I call these, Da Vinci probably won't be so pleased with this, but I call them my little scrubbies because I can lift paint out. I can clean anything up. It's amazing what I managed to do with these. They don't last as many paintings because I'm really tough on them, but they're great. They've got the perfect amount of flex without damaging the surface of your paper. So really, a lot of people buy lots and lots of brushes, but that's all I ever use.
Well, they can buy more if they want them. Well, Susan, this has been absolutely delightful. You are an incredible teacher and even more incredible artist. Seeing your work is just phenomenal. I should mention to people that we have some videos. They were made a long time ago, but they're still very valid. And we have them at streamlineartvideo.com or streamline.art. And so you can see some of these photos are a little bit old, but these are older workshops that you did on video, and they're still available. The leaf painting one, that's one I need to get right away. But fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And we'll have to figure out how to do some new ones. And so we'll have to talk about that.
The great thing, those videos have got some of these things that I've been talking about. So,
absolutely. I would imagine they do.
Great place to go for them.
Well, why don't you come back on camera so we can see your face for a second? We'll just move the camera slightly so we can say goodbye. It sounds like you have a helper there.
Yes, Richard will take it off the tripod and he'll probably hand hold it.
All right. Well, Susan, this has been an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you, Richard, for assisting. And here we go. We're moving it around. Looks like quite a studio you have there. And,
yes, you can probably see all the mess.
Well, that's all right. We're all kind of messy. Well, we've lost you. I don't know where you are now, but anyway, we
just trying to get it to the screen where we can turn it around the other way. Just turn it this way, darling.
There we go. Nope.
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
there
okay.
we are.
There we are. Terrific. Well,
I can paint, but we're not technical.
Well, we'll look for an opportunity when we get our trip together. We're going to do a trip to New Zealand, so we'll look for an opportunity to connect with you somehow, and you can come paint with us. We'll do a painting trip in New Zealand. I'm not sure when. It was going to be February 22, but it'll probably be February of 23. Summertime over there, and
it's a lovely time.
So we will put your website and your video links in the comments section, and I just want to encourage everybody to visit your website and to look at all your work. It's fabulous, really nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you, Susan.